How's everyone doing? How was y'all's work day? If y'all don't mind, if y'all can turn on your camera, if you feel comfortable. If not, that is totally fine. Um, that way we can kind of see each other and get to know each other more. This is a networking event as well at the same time. So we're trying our best. I know we're trying to be creative. We're trying to pivot, especially during these times. Hey, James, thanks for making it out. Hi, everyone. Andres, yeah, I see some familiar names. Thanks.
Saludos.
Igualmente, igualmente. So today we're gonna go ahead and get started, guys. I know time is precious, and some of you just got off of work. Today we'll be talking. Let's talk Python. Intro to the coding language. And today is a special day because this is our very first event, joint webinar collaboration with a local professional organization here in the city of Austin, and they're called the Austin Hispanic Hackers. And I'm pretty sure we're going to see some our speakers from that wonderful organization. And I already see some familiar names that are part of that organization. So welcome, bienvenidos. And so I'm very excited for this collaboration that's going on. So I really love it. So with that being said, a couple of housekeeping items. Webinar is being recorded. Feel free to ask any questions in the chat. And then once we get to the Q&A session, we'll definitely go back through the chat and answer the questions. Or if you feel comfortable, I highly encourage this option. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question. All participants will be muted and no video once we get started, and I'll let you know when. This is just to make the bandwidth and the Zoom logistics just much more easier and flawless. So the agenda, quick agenda for today. So at 5 o'clock, we'll begin. Welcome attendees, about 5 minutes. I'll talk a little bit about the SHPE Austin background, how we came about. And then after that, we'll talk about introduce the Austin Hispanic Hackers. Should take around between 5 to 10 minutes, give or take. If not, it'll give us more time to kind of dig into the coding language. And we'll then introduce the Python coding language. That should take around 30 to 40 minutes. And then followed by a Q&A session. And then we'll have some closing remarks by both organizations. And then the webinar will end promptly at 6 p.m. Again, I really do want to say special thanks to our partner for this webinar. Without y'all, this couldn't have happened, especially talking about coding, Austin Hispanic Hackers, and that's their cool logo that they have. And representing them today will be Tim, which I'll introduce here in a bit. But first, who is SHPE Austin? SHPE Austin, the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, SHPE Austin for short, was founded back in 1982 here in the city of Austin, 38 years ago to be exact. We're very proud. We have developed a proud history of excellence and community involvement. And for those of us that knows us pretty well, y'all can vouch for that. We're focused a lot on STEM outreach. We're constantly growing in the Austin area. In addition to that, we provide professional development for our membership, such as this one. STEM outreach events, which we weigh heavily on. That's our main focus besides professional development. And then also we provide networking opportunities for our members. And then last but not least, every year since 1994, we've been giving away 3 $1,000 scholarships. And recently, about 2 years ago, due to generous funding and continued sponsorship from our local companies here in the Austin area, we have been able to increase that to 4 $1,000 scholarships to any high school that is going to college. So I'm very proud of that. A couple upcoming events for those of you that are interested. We actually have our STEM virtual tutoring that's been going on for about a month now with our partner schools, Allison and Linder Elementary. And it's from 4 to 5 actually, and we were able to just condense it to one time to make it easier for our volunteers. And that's been going great. We have about 15 volunteers and they've been going strong, steady through Zoom. And we have about 15, 20 students, elementary students showing up Mondays and Tuesdays. So I'm very happy for that. So there's another flyer that we provided to the schools, and the top student with the highest attendance will win a free laptop based of courtesy of SHPE Austin. So that's pretty cool. And once we told them that announcement, the kids' faces were ecstatic. They were smile from one cheek to the other. So they're excited for that. Another event that I would like to share that our STEM community outreach directors are doing is Noche de Ciencias, and that is coming up in December. And what that is pretty much a night in science, hence the name. So it's pretty much hands-on STEM activities, bilingual college information for parents, and then we'll also be giving out raffles or prizes in this case, sorry. So if you'd like to volunteer for that, feel free to shoot us an email, ship.austin@gmail.com. And this year we are teaming up with Eastside Memorial High School, which is a Title I high school on the east side of Austin. So here's a collage of pictures of for the past year and a half. Obviously, this is pre-COVID. I miss those days, so we definitely, you can see the familia vibe that we have. We've been very active in the community, and also networking events that we provided, and also we like to have fun, right? There's the Christmas party we had, the casino membership mixer we've had for the 2 years in a row now, pre-COVID, and some networking happy hour, social hours. So looking forward to that after all this is over, right? All right, so let's get to our main speaker from Austin Hispanic Hackers. I would like to introduce Mr. Timothy Juan. He is a web applications developer. He currently works at Open Symmetry. He is a Lambda School graduate, worked in the medical field previously, enjoys learning in general and about personal finance, likes to travel and paddleboard specifically. And if you want to connect with him after this webinar, there's LinkedIn, and I'm sure he can post a LinkedIn link in the chat later on today during the webinar. So, Mr. Tim, it is all yours. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Let's get started. Thank you so much for coming today, everyone. And thank you, Omar, for the introduction. My name is Tim, and I am from Hispanic Hackers. I am not Hispanic myself, obviously, but I enjoy spending time with the group of friends that I have here. Just to start off, I want to introduce our group. It's just a small group that started in 2014, and this is our website at hispanichackers.com. And our main core values are basically to help, hack, and hire, which is basically getting members of the group into the technology field and increasing diversity in technology. It's not much of a website right now, but we are going through a transition period with leadership. So we're going to be rolling out more things here in the future. And one of the best ways probably to connect with us is to join the meetup group, which is where we host the events and let people know, as well as our Slack channel as well. Our previous meetup was the coding interview challenge. If you guys know, the interview is a big part of getting a job in the technology field. So it's always good to practice, and it's a chance to network with people. And then sometimes we have even recruiters that come to the events. So that's pretty interesting. We have a whole host of other events. Eddie talked about, it did a presentation with the Austin Python group here about a language called Golang. We had an interview practice. We had all sorts of different things. And you can visit the meetup page here and get a feel for what kind of events that we have here. Our upcoming event, which we're planning for December 9th, is called Black and Latinx in Tech. And that's about 6 to 8 p.m. on December 9th. We're working through that right now. And once we get that finalized, we'll put that up on the meetup site here. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with our presentation. As you know, today's talk is about Python. And first up, I'm just going to talk about the presentation layout, let you get a feel of what I'll be presenting to you. First up, don't worry about the slides and the code and all that kind of thing, because we're going to have it for you after this. I'm going to get with Omar, and you're going to have access to these slides as well as the code repo as well from GitHub. I'm just going to talk a little bit about myself, give you a background to let you know where I'm coming from. That way, if you're trying to get into the field, you can get you can relate to how like the path to actually get into the field. Just another story for you to absorb. And then we'll talk more about the language, just what is Python and why do you want to learn Python, and then a comparison between Python and other languages. And then lastly, we'll go over how to get started with running the Python on your computer, and then also some of the syntax of Python itself. And in closing, I'll link you to some resources and then also some steps that you can take to get started. And then just going to close out the presentation. Throughout the presentation, I'll also have links here on the bottom. These will be here for you since they're relevant to that topic. So I feel like it would be good to have it here instead of all of them packed at the end of the resources, which is what happened during the beginning. A little bit about myself. I'm currently at Open Cemetery. Basically, my title is just a fancy word for making solutions for their company, just little things here and there, like sending out email summaries for some of the projects that they have. And then previously, I was at Tenavox, which was a commercial real estate startup. So I was there for about 8 months. And before this, I was in pharmacy for about 3 years or so before I pivoted to software engineering. So kind of the path that I took was I had left pharmacy. I decided just to, just leave and try my hand at this new field. I think I was looking for more freedom in my life, more time and more freedom and that sort of thing. So I went through this period of taking a year off, and I freelanced with some clients back in Virginia, which is where I'm from. And I made them websites and collaborated with them to improve their business. And then I also spent some time in Colombia to kind of gain more perspective on life and take online courses. So it was really cool. I had a good time. And after I got back from that, I attended Lambda school because I wanted to round out my software engineering education. So I took this 7-month program. It was about full stack web development and computer science. And it was 100% remote, so I didn't have to be in a certain place. So I took that opportunity and I headed to, I traveled to more. That's a big part of me. So I ran over to Guadalajara, Guanajuato, and Monterrey also. And just a little bit about myself. Right now, I'm really interested in investing and trading in the stock market, learning about it, I should say. And yeah, traveling and learning Spanish as well. So these are just some of the photos of the place I've been, just to give you, just to switch it up a little bit. All right, so what is Python? Python is an object-oriented back language. And you'll get more familiar if you dive into the web development world, but that's kind of like the classification for Python. And the main feature of this language is that it's very reader friendly. It's closely related to English. It's a language that's really easy to learn because that was the intention when it was created. So it was released back in '91 by this gentleman called Guido van Rossum. I don't know if I'm saying that right. And he was looking for something to do during one of the winter in December. And he just built out this language. He started building out this language, and then it was released 2 years later in '91. Interestingly enough, Python is based off of Monty Python and the Holy Grail and those sorts of movies. I don't know the exact movies, but it is based off of Monty Python. The most recent version we have of Python is Python 3. And Python 2 is still there. It's still pretty popular with companies since most of their architecture is built with that language. But actually earlier this year, it was an end of life for the language, meaning that they don't do any new releases for the language itself. So I just want to show you a little bit here what the syntax looks like. Basically, this is just printing out hello in Python, and you can see that it's not too difficult to interpret compared to some other languages. And here's just something I pulled from Course Report because I thought it was a pretty cool summary, just to get an idea of what Python actually is, give you more of a frame of reference. And a little bit more about Python. It's different from other languages because it uses lines and indentation instead of semicolons and parentheses. It's a way to just organize the code, in other words. On the bottom left, you have Python, and you can see that the spacing is in a certain order, and it doesn't end with anything particularly. Whereas in the middle and on the far right, you see brackets, you see semicolons, and the middle one is JavaScript, and the far right is C#. Just to give you an idea of what other languages look like compared to Python. And Python itself is a true object-oriented programming language, and it supports concepts like abstraction, polymorphism, sorry, not installation, I'll change that, inheritance and encapsulation. And a mnemonic to remember this is API, is how I learned it. And in terms of styling, how to do the indentation, how to do the spacing, how many characters should be in a line, you can use the PEP 8 style guidelines. And that's part of the python.org website. And you can find more information on the link down here as well. And Python uses something called snake case, obviously, because it's Python. Compared to some other cases, these are some of the other cases and what those look like. And mainly the snake case is used for like variable names or function names and that sort of thing. It's just a convention. It's not like a hard and fast rule that you have to write it that way, but that's how, that's one of the casings that Python uses. So why should you learn Python? I think first of all, it's really easy to pick up. I'm going to show you this in a little bit called the Zen of Python. But one of the core tenets is to make something easy to understand, easy to learn, so that you can create things quickly, because you're not trying to make this like enterprise level application, which you can, but it's more for like beginning users who want to do scientific calculations. There's a whole host of things that you can do with Python. And Python is considered a batteries included language. It has a huge library of different modules that you can use, things that people have already built out for you, so that you can just import that module in and start using some of those features. And then of course, you can also, beyond the official modules, there's also modules that people have built. So there's this whole huge community that you can benefit from. One of the things that I look for when I try to learn a language is I look for how stable it is or how established it is. And one of the ways you can tell is how large the community is. And then some other things like open source, if people are contributing to the language, adding to its growth. And as you've seen before, Python is used in many things like web development, data analysis, machine learning, Internet of Things. It's a whole host of things that you can use. It's also supported on many platforms. Interestingly enough, I heard Raspberry Pi today released a desktop computer for 70 bucks or so. It's like a keyboard and it's like a computer inside. I linked the link on below so you can check it out. It's just kind of interesting how amazing technology has progressed. And then Python also supports many different paradigms of coding. Again, not hard and fast rules, but kind of just styling or how to write out your code in certain ways. So some of the ones are procedural, object-oriented, and functional. And then if you're trying to get into certain parts of Python, there's different frameworks as well, which is something that helps expand it further, makes it easier to build things. And so for web development, you have something called Django and Flask. You can find more of a comparison in one of the links below here, Django versus Flask. And lastly, if you haven't dealt with coding before, there's something called garbage collection. And when I was taking a module in my school, the C language, you have to clean up your own instances. Like if you set up an instance, you have to manually clean that up. Yep, by typing in a line of code. But Python is very simple, as we know. So they have automatic garbage collection. So that's another cool feature of Python. And how does Python compare to other languages? Python is one of the more well-known languages. It's more established. It's been there since '91. And you should use Python for the purpose that you need, or just any language in general. And you don't have to learn everything. That's not the goal here. We're just trying to learn enough to build what we need. And so on top of this, usually languages, there's frameworks and libraries that you can tack on and that will help you build things. So that increases like a whole bunch of other things that you might need to learn. But again, don't get lost in the jungle. Just pick the things you need and just reach for those when you need them. So here are some examples. If you're looking for a job, try Google searching, you know, what are the top languages during the year for that year, 2020, 2021 maybe. Maybe web development, you can try JavaScript. These are just some of the suggestions that I put up. Of course, there's a lot of variability and they can overlap as well. So from this website on the bottom, these are the top 5 languages that were mentioned there: Python, Java, C#, JavaScript, and Golang is more of a newer language from Google. Okay, so let's get started into running Python itself. First up, you have to go grab Python, and you can do that at their official website, python.org. The latest version is version 3.9.0. And then secondly, you'll probably want an IDE, which is kind of like, they call it an integrated developer environment. It's just an application for you to type code, basically. I've used PyCharm in the past. I wanted to try something new for this presentation, so I went with Komodo. And so I did download Python 3.9.0 for Windows. And this is what the screen looks like here. I just downloaded the executable, ran it, no problem for me. It's also available for other platforms. And I believe Mac was pretty simple as well, because I did it for Mac before. You shouldn't have too many problems. You can grab the Komodo IDE with the link at the bottom here as well. And then with Komodo, I found that I had to register for a free account. I guess they just wanted to keep track of how many people are downloading it and that sort of thing. And so you have to make a free account. And when you run Komodo, the last thing you have to do is choose a debugger. It's just basically how the code is interpreted when you run the code. And this is one of the config screens that you might run into when you run Komodo. So I thought this was useful to put up here for you. And then another thing you can do is run Python in the terminal. The terminal is already included in your computer, and you can actually just run it from there. I think right after you install Python on your computer, of course. And then the next thing is check out their documentation and resources, which are fantastic. I really like what they have there compared to some of the other languages I've seen. Really easy to follow. You just have to take your time with it. And so I'm going to actually make this, we're going to actually kind of work through this together. So I am going to load up the command prompt or the terminal. I'm on Windows 10, and this is my terminal. I'm just trying to make it bigger for you guys to see. I think that's the big it might go. Okay. And so we're just going to try to run some commands here. I got this from the documentation, and you can try this for yourself as well. But first up, you run py. This lets you enter the Python terminal where you can run Python commands and that sort of thing. And then one of the things I mentioned before was the Zen of Python, which is something that was written by Tim Peters, and it just lets you get an idea of what Python is focusing on. So for example, it focuses on beautiful is better than ugly, explicit is better than implicit. And this is just a little fun thing you can do. It's not really useful in writing code. If you're trying to skip lines, you can hold down Shift and push Enter. If you're trying to submit that line, you just push Enter and it'll go. Right now, you can't see that on the screen, but as soon as we do some things, you'll see it here. If you want to exit the Python terminal, you just type exit, I believe it's with parentheses, and it hops out. And if you just want to clear everything completely, you're outside of the Python terminal now, you do CLS, and that'll clear everything for you. So we're just going to try something real quick here in Python, make sure it works. So we can do simple math operations. 2 plus 2 is 4. You can write an if else loop. So an example would be some number, and we're just going to put 10. So I'm basically writing a variable and I'm setting it to 10. This is how you do that. I'm going to go down a line by holding Shift, pushing Enter, and I'm going to write a basic if condition. So let's say some number is more than or equal to 10. That's my if. Okay, if this happens, I want you to do this. And remember that Python goes off of indentation and spacing. So you want to do a tab, or depending on how you have your computer set up. I just push tab, and I want it to write out, okay, more than 10, right? And then if it's not fulfilling the first condition, what do you want it to do? You always want to catch your if and else statements so that it doesn't, you can avoid bugs in your code. So if nothing else, you just want to say print, I don't know, less than 10. And then after all that, we just push enter, and then it will run through that and it will spit out the answer for you. So it turns out in this case, 10 is equal to or more than 10. So then it prints out more than 10. So that's a basic if else statement. You can do the elif as well. That's the else if, but you can discover that on your own. It's not too hard to figure out. Another thing we can try out is a list. A list is just basically a collection of things, right? So I'm just gonna set up an empty list right now. So when we type out that list, it's empty. There's nothing in it. Let's say we want to add some numbers in. So there's a command. There's always methods or things that you can run that will do certain actions for you. So let's add 1 to the list. Let's add 2 and 3 as well. So we have something to work with. So now when we visit li again, we have a list of 1, 2, and 3. You can also check how long the list is by using len. It's basically length, but it's len. We call it len. And you can use this with a list. You can use it with words to count the different letters in the list as well, I believe. And when you run that, it gives you back 3. That's how long the list is. And there's a lot of other commands that you can discover on your own. But I just want to show you here one other thing, which is, let's say I want to take off the last number in that list and then store it in a variable. So you can do that in one line. You just write a variable name. I wrote popped, and I'm gonna put li.pop. So that's gonna take the 3, and then it's gonna store in this variable called popped. And then when we check popped, it's gonna be 3. And so we check the original list. Now you see that the 3 is gone. And then lastly, I want to show you the math module. So when we were talking about modules, things that were included in this language, the math module is one of the ones that are included. And you can do this by just importing it into the code. So you can write it right here in the terminal. You can import math. And then what you can do is just, let's say we want to check out pi, for example. What is pi? So I stored the value on pi, the variable named pi, and then there we have the value of pi. Let's say you want to round it. You can do something called math.ceil, also known as ceiling, and that will round it up to the next whole value. So that's going to be 4. You want to round down, it's just .floor, right? And yeah, you can play around with this pretty quickly. If you just want to do some calculations, whatever, you can load this up, or if you have a calculator, or there's a whole bunch of the things is what I'm trying to get at. So revisiting back into that slide that I had before, the commands are here. You can play for yourself. I wrote it out for you, so it makes it easy. One thing that you can do to get up to speed really quickly is using this website. It's something that I used during school and was recommended. I'll let you get a glimpse here. And it's just basically going over the syntax of Python. And it has these comments that kind of just teach you really quickly. It's not like a whole, a whole documentation. It's just like, okay, here's the example. This is what it does. That was really useful for me. And in the next section, how are we doing on time? 23, okay. For the strings, I wanted to show you, we're gonna open up Komodo, which is that IDE that I spoke about, this is one of the things that you can use to write your code instead of writing it in the terminal. When you open up Komodo, you want to go to New File Template, and you can search for different templates. In our case, it's going to be Python 3. And so you can just, a quick introduction is just all the things that you need are usually near the top. I don't really have to touch the bottom too much, but these are just viewing options. You can tuck away things and run the commands and run the program itself up here. I do have some files already written, so we're just going to use that for in the interest of time. So first up, we have strings. And so another interesting thing that you can do is you just copy the code from here and paste it right into the terminal and run it from there. So that's another cool thing that you can use. And then if you want to run it inside of Komodo, if you just click this, it's going to ask you for what interpreter you want to use. But if you want to bypass that, you can just hold Control on your keyboard and then left click on this. And then you'll notice that the output is here on the bottom. So just like a quick introduction to Komodo. And some of the things that you should note here is that the way that we wrote the string here, this was the old way to print out variables into a string, insert them into a string and print it out to the screen. In the next slide, I'll show you the newer way to do that. So we spoke about Komodo, and we talked about terminal. And then I'll also have all this code in a GitHub repo, which is in a link down here where you can just copy and play around with it if you want. It's like directly what I'm writing here on the screen for you. And then in the next section, a little bit about functions. So let's say we have this example where members are joining into an organization called SHPE. We want to welcome the new members, and we also want to send the admin a reminder to grant them privileges or check if they paid their dues or something like that. And so we wanted to write something in order to do that. So what we have here are two different functions: welcome new members, notification new member. And those are just two functions that we can use over and over and over again, because those are just there. Those are definitions, and we can change them if we need to, but those are there to be used and called on. And then in lines 14 and 17, we're actually reaching into those definitions and using them. And as you can see here, I'm joining a new organization and I'm inserting my information. And later, maybe like 5 minutes afterwards, maybe you want to notify the admin that this person just joined. And so you can see the output here. And this is just a gross oversimplification. Of course, you can do more advanced things, but I wanted just to print out these texts so that you know that that's what it's doing. It's for our purposes here, just for demonstrations. And when I mentioned that there was another way to write strings, this is the other way. They're called F strings, or formatted string literals. And for me, it's a lot easier to write. You just plug in the variable name. So for example, you have this variable plugged in, full name, and you can just insert it right into that string and it prints out what you need. So in this example, Timothy Huang has just joined, welcome them. And this is kind of the basics of functions. And the next code example are classes. This is object-oriented, so you want to get familiar with classes and objects. And one of the concepts that we have is called inheritance. So on the top, you have a parent class, which you can use to create like a blueprint. And then you can create children from that blueprint. So from the parent class, I created a child class. And I won't go into this too much in the interest of time, but basically our results is this. We can set up initial count, but maybe we want to set up members, we want to set up admins, we want to set up maybe contributors, different types. And the main reason behind all this is that we want to reuse our code. And that's why we're doing these classes. And it's also the core tenet of the language itself. I know I went over this section pretty quickly, but feel free to check out the code repo yourself and you can play around with it. And then next up, these are some of the resources. I only put up a few, and there's actually an Austin Python meetup here that you can check out. I haven't personally gone to that one, but it's there on Meetup. And then some action steps you can take. There are free courses that you can sign up, and though you can just go through them. One of the popular ones is Google. And then there's also ones from University of Michigan. Again, the links are here. You can just click on them. And then play around with your IDE. Set something up and kind of type code and play around with it. Set up a GitHub account so that you can store your code and learn to version control your code so that you can keep track of what you write. And then just build things and learn more about the language, and don't get too caught up about trying to learn everything. Just learn something very deeply, because the concepts there will carry across all different languages. And then of course, finally, you can learn more about the ecosystem. So you can go into Django or Flask with Python, for example. And then where you go from there is really up to you. So these are just some action steps that I wrote just to help get you started. And that's going to be the bulk of my presentation for Python. I left some links here for you for Hispanic Hackers, and also my LinkedIn in case you want to get in contact with me. And some parting thoughts I have for you is just always remain a student. Don't think like you know everything, because every day I learn something new as well. You never stop learning with this career. And then leave things better than you found it. And then it helps a lot too with ergonomics if you have a standing desk and sitting desk as well. So this is kind of the environment I work with, and I want to share that with you guys. And that is it for my presentation.
Wow, Tim, that's pretty good. You did a good job, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Audience, what do y'all think? Let me launch a quick poll. I'm kind of curious. That way Tim can kind of see the results as well. I'm going to go ahead and launch it. If you don't mind answering those 2 questions, really easy. Shouldn't take long. I believe we have a couple more minutes. If the audience has any questions that they would like to ask through the mic. If not, Tim, you got a couple minutes. If you want to go back through the example 3 that, you can spend a little bit more time on that if you like. It depends on the audience. What would you like to do? This is for y'all. This webinar is for y'all's purpose to get better. All right. So question number 1 is, I'm going to go ahead and end the polling, and I'm going to share the results. So number 1 is, do you code? 75% said yes, and 25% not yet, but after this webinar, I will definitely try it. So, so that's awesome. What coding language do you use? And most of the people here, it's between Python and JavaScript. JavaScript is a front end, I believe, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, Tim. I don't know. I'm not a
yeah, it's mostly a front end language used on the web development side of things, but it reaches into other things now.
So awesome. So Python and Java, and then CSS too. It's pretty popular. So. All right, so I guess we have a couple more minutes. If you don't mind running through example 3 before we open it up to questions again, Tim, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'm sure something might come up going through this part. So classes and objects are one of the main parts of the language. And so what I'm doing here is that when we set up a kind of a blueprint, the blueprint basically has these 3 properties. We have first name, last name, and email. That's just what all accounts have when we set them up. And then 2 of the methods that it has for that class, this parent class, is introduce self and RSVP events. And those automatically come with this class. Now we're going to set up another child class. So as I mentioned earlier, it could be a ship member, it could be a ship admin, it could be a contributor, who knows. And so for this demonstration, we're going to add a member. This child class basically gets everything from the parent class. So it gets all these properties and all these methods. And then in this language, you also have to use pass when I was reading through the docs, you have to use pass in order to inherit all these different definitions and methods and properties. And that's just something that I put here in the code right after I set up that that new child class. And then it also has its own special method for this member, and it's called pay dues, something which all people like to do when they join organizations, pay up dues. And so real quick about the code itself, let's look at the child class. I'm going to open up the Komodo just so it makes it more clear. And this is going to be in a repo once again, which I'll link for you guys. And let's just go through it. Basically, this first part, I'm bringing in the parent class or account. Normally, you have the file name exactly as you would have the name of the class. But for this case, I wrote it so that it's easier for you all. So this would normally be account, lowercase, import, capital account. That's how you bring it in. You want to set up that child class. The way that you do that is you write class, and then you write the name of the child class. So in this case, it's member. And then where you're inheriting the class from, which is account. And we brought that in back on line 3. And the pass thing is, inheriting without any modifications. And it has its own method, pay dues. Basically, it uses its own properties. This is what the self stands for, because if you remember, the account has first name, last name, and also email. So we're going to use the email portion of that here. And then it also takes in an argument. And how is that, what method is that person using to pay their dues? Okay, maybe I'll use PayPal this time. Maybe I'll use Meetup or whatever method that you like. And then this is the part where we start using those classes that we wrote. So I'm setting up a new member. I give it those 3 things that it needs: first name, last name, email. And I store it in a variable called T, just simple. And then I have to pay my dues. So I'm going to pay them to Omar via PayPal, for example. And so I just use that, and pay dues is already on this child class. You can just call it right away, and you give it what it needs, which is that method. And then that will print out the string letting Omar know that I've paid the dues via PayPal. And then this method is an inherited method from that parent, from the account class. And the method is RSVP events. It's already included because it inherited, so you can just call it directly. There's a lot of things going on, but we're just going to keep it simple in that way. There's a lot of things that you can manipulate and change methods and all that, but don't worry about it. I've paid my dues. Now I want to RSVP. I want to go to a meetup event. So let's say I run this command. And then once I'm at the meetup event, maybe I want to introduce myself, meet some friends. And meetup, this is the one that, this is an argument that RSVP events needs so that it can print out the string. Otherwise, you might get an error. And we can try running it real quick. But RSVP events, it says the first name, the last name of the person RSVP'd by wherever they RSVP'd from. And introduce self doesn't need anything because it just says, hello, my name is so-and-so. So let's run that real quick and see what happens. I'm holding control. I'm left clicking on the play button here. Okay, so Omar knows that this person, tim@gmail.com, has paid his dues. Maybe grant him access to RSVP events, all sorts of things. And then there's a notification saying that, oh, he registered for a meetup event, RSVP'd for an event. And then at the event, he introduced himself. Very gross example, gross oversimplification, but you get the idea. Let's try one thing before we go here. And I'm gonna just say I RSVP'd, but I forgot where I RSVP'd from. Let's run it and see what happens. And it always asks you to save before you run it, by the way. Oh, okay, so looks like we're missing some stuff. It says that RSVP events missing one required argument, positional argument, the medium. Where did he RSVP from? How do I know he RSVP, but I want to know from where? So maybe from my own analytics, you know, like more people are logging through Meetup or something like that. So we have to provide that. And that's the gist of classes. Again, there's a lot of things with OOP, but this is a very simple example for y'all. What other questions have you all come up with, or anything else I can answer?
No questions? I guess everyone's a pro at Python, I guess.
It's that simple to get started.
I posted on the chat that Tim's LinkedIn profile. And then I also made a comment that I'll be sending out the presentation after the webinar, probably in a few days. So, so be on the lookout in your inboxes. On behalf of SHPE Austin and myself, Tim, I really do appreciate you taking the time off your schedule and going over this first collaboration, and what I hope is not the last, but the beginning of many between SHPE Austin and Austin Hispanic Hackers.